Back here, first things first, Undisputed coming up as we wrap things up here. Jenny Teff, good morning. What are you guys talking about today?
Good morning, Jenna. Coming up on Undisputed, did Russell Wilson pull away last night in the MVP race? And how big of a hit did the Cowboys' playoff chances take thanks to my Vikings? I mean, we can keep talking about it. It's fine with me. Plus, Reggie Bush and Michael Rappaport are both in studio with us. Undisputed coming up next. Jenna, back to you.
Jenny, thanks. Have a great show.
Thank you.
Time now.
The other team,
Speaking of which, Monday Night Football, Russell Wilson and the Seahawks taking on the undefeated Niners in the Bay. Pick it up in overtime. Seattle in the red zone, but Russ's pass picked off by linebacker Trey Greenlaw. Greenlaw returns his first career interception, 47 yards. That gets San Francisco to midfield. After Jimmy Garoppolo gets the Niners in field goal range, Chase McLaughlin with a chance to be hero.
Yeah.
But that 47-yard attempt wide left. And after both teams trade punts, now it's time for Seattle's Jason Myers to play hero. His 42-yarder to win the game for the Seahawks. Splitting the uprights. Seattle handing San Francisco their first loss of the season. All right, Nick, how'd they do it? How did the Seahawks win this game last night?
Well, credit to them for coming back from 10 down on an undefeated team. For the Clowney play flipped the momentum, so to speak. All of a sudden it became a game, but they gave one of those back later in the game. So both teams had defensive score. They shut down the Niners running attack, which nobody's been able to do all year long. They made Jimmy Garoppolo look really bad, which a handful of teams have been able to do throughout the season. And they were given a gift by Kyle Shanahan at the end of this game that the more I think about it, the more inexplicable it becomes. Like, San Francisco was fortunate to even get to overtime. Seattle could have won in regulation. The kid did miss a 47-yarder in overtime, the young kicker for San Francisco, but he had a 47-yarder at the end of regulation to get him to overtime. And Seattle, with no timeouts, punts the ball away with 1:50 left in overtime. At that moment, if San Francisco runs the ball twice, the game's over. And maybe they break one. If not, they can take a tie. Instead, they were oddly aggressive, considering they were the team that came into this game 2 games clear of the division, and thanks to New Orleans' shocking loss this weekend, 2 games clear of everybody. They could have finished this point of their season with 0 losses, with no other team in the NFC having fewer than 2 losses, and instead, at an odd attempt to give themselves, a chance for a 50-yard field goal, with a few seconds left, they gave Seattle a chance to get the ball back and win the football game when Seattle and San Francisco in this game, Canty, had different objectives once you get late in overtime. Seattle desperately needs the win to stay alive for the division. San Francisco desperately needs not to lose to stay in firm control of the division. So I thought that was a huge mistake by Shanahan to give the chance for Russell Wilson to come back on the field 25 game seconds after he had left the field. And it's even compounded by the fact what he was trusting was a quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo who had 3 turnovers, and honest to God, could have had 7 in this football game. He was miserable throughout. So Seattle was very fortunate to be able to not come away with the tie, to come away with a victory, and now all of a sudden find themselves 1 game back in this division.
Yeah, to me, the sequence of play calling that Kyle Shanahan had in overtime, that's one that leaves a lot left to be desired because, yeah, that could potentially cost them an opportunity to win the NFC West. So you're talking about a team that was in line to have a bye in the #1 overall seed. Now they're talking about having to play on wild card weekend on the road. So that's a huge difference. But to me, that game was about the Seattle Seahawks defense taking advantage of a depleted San Francisco 49ers offense. Keep in mind, you didn't have any George Kittle going into the game. Emmanuel Sanders got knocked out early. And then, of course, no Matt Breida, so you don't have that 1-2 punch in the backfield with Tevin Coleman. Now, they did get back Joe Staley, but Jadeveon Clowney was going to work, and that was really a non-factor throughout the entire game. And you have to say that that was advantage Seahawks just because of the level of game-changing plays that Jadeveon Clowney was able to make. I know we'll pay attention to the sack, forced fumble, and then the touchdown that he had on the scoop and score. But, I mean, he was harassing Jimmy Garoppolo all night long. He had 5 quarterback hits, and this was a defense coming into this game that had struggled to put pressure on the quarterback. But now it feels like that Seattle Seahawks defense is rounding into form. The last 3 games, they're trending in the right right direction, haven't allowed opponent to rush for over 100 yards, 7 total takeaways. Like, you're starting to see the dividends come in the return on investment from the moves that John Schneider made, trading for Jadeveon Clowney, trading for Quandre Diggs, getting Jaron Reed back after he had been suspended for the first 6 games. So we knew that the Seattle Seahawks offense was going to have a chance because Russell Wilson is so good. But the fact that that defense is playing the way that they are now, I mean, now you have to elevate this team from just in the playoff picture to a championship contender.
And finally, if you were skeptical of the Niners, as I was, last night just reinforced that skepticism. Great defense, excellent running game, even though it was slowed down. I know they didn't have their weapons, but the question is, can they pass on the level of the other excellent teams in the NFC? Thus far, the answer's been no, and Jimmy G has a turnover problem. Only Jameis Winston, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and Danny Fumbles have more turnovers this year than Jimmy Garoppolo. That is a big problem. All 4 of those teams have something in common. None of them are going to be in the playoff picture. The Niners were hoping to be the #1 overall seed. That's now absolutely in jeopardy.
The other part of it that was impressive, that was the 2nd consecutive overtime win for the Seahawks, going on the road playing against a division opponent that had extra time to prepare. Yep. That's impressive.
Seahawks now just 1 game back in the loss column, so something to watch down the stretch there. Yep. All right, on to the NFC East now. With 7 weeks left in the regular season, we know the division will come down to a 2-team race. Eagles, Cowboys both sitting at 5-4, but with Dallas coming off a loss and the Eagles stringing 2 wins together, Jerry Jones knows, quote, Philadelphia is coming. Kenny, who's going to win the NFC East, Cowboys or Eagles?
I want to give the nod to the Dallas Cowboys just because they've been able to take advantage of the Eagles head-to-head in the Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott era. They're 5-2 in their matchups with the Eagles. They're 5-0 when Zeke plays. So, I mean, that just shows you how their style of football presents problems for the Eagles in terms of the overall matchup. But, I mean, I don't trust the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. So when you start talking about playing against quality competition, I don't know that Jason Garrett can be the difference in those closely contested games late in the season in a positive way. Yeah, last week against the Minnesota Vikings, you have to say he was a negative. When you look at the play calling in the 4th quarter, I think you had a situation where it was 1st and goal from the 6-yard line, and everybody and their mama knows that you're going to try to feed Zeke Elliott. You only end up with getting a field goal out of that possession that leaves you down 4. And then they had the possession that was late in the game where you get the ball 1st and 10 at the 19, and you decide to give it to Zeke again twice for a net negative in terms of overall yards in that situation. I just feel like Jason Garrett, in terms of a play caller and overall game management, needs to be better, and he hasn't. So it's no wonder this Dallas Cowboys team only has 1 win against an opponent with a winning record, that being the Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody else they struggle against, I mean, they had the blowout loss. I don't understand who this Dallas Cowboys team is. We got to figure it out, Jenna. But, I mean, if we keep asking the question about them, whether or not they're going to be a contender, eventually, if they don't answer it in a positive way, the answer is no.
Well, you answered to me why I have to pick Philadelphia, and I don't love Philadelphia this year. But right now, it would appear the discrepancy in coaching is enormous, and that might be enough to offset the discrepancy in talent that right now Dallas might have over Philadelphia. Because going into the season, if I had told you Dak Prescott would far and away outperform Carson Wentz, you would say the Cowboys will be cruising to this divisional championship. And the numbers this year are jarring. Dak's been a top 10 quarterback across the board in every statistical category. Carson Wentz has been below average across the board in every statistical category. Now, I think Carson Wentz is better than those numbers suggest, and I don't think Dak Prescott is quite as good as those numbers suggest, but the delta between the two has been immense. And Philadelphia's schedule has been far harder up to this point. And Philadelphia's been far more injured up to this point. Yet they got the same record. So what is the answer? The answer might be the guy without the contract extension, Jason Garrett. The guy who sets up, along with Kellen Moore, the game plan that led to 3 first-half points against New Orleans, that led to being down 31-3 to Green Bay, that led to being down 21-3 to the New York Jets, that led to being down 12-3 to the New York Giants, and led to being down 14-0 to the Minnesota Vikings. Jason Garrett and Kellen Moore, who, as you mentioned, 2nd and 2, down 4, 11-yard line. Dak playing one of the best games of his life. feed Zeke, didn't work. Let's do it again. And all of a sudden, you have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. So, listen, I don't love either of these teams right now. But Philly's got 4 very winnable games down the stretch. Dallas's hardest part of their schedule is just underway. And Jason Garrett, I don't think, has the right answers for the test that's coming up. So I have to go with Philadelphia.